My girlfriend keeps talking about how perfect her ex is in front of me. The wine glass trembled slightly in my hand as Sarah's voice drifted across the dinner table, her eyes sparkling with a light that made my stomach twist. Oh, that reminds me of when Marcus took me to that little Italian place in Brooklyn, she said, twirling her pasta absently. He always knew the best hidden restaurants. He had this incredible ability to find authentic places that no one else knew about. I forced a smile and took another sip of wine, the Chianti suddenly tasting bitter on my tongue. This was the third time tonight she'd mentioned Marcus, her ex. The supposedly perfect ex who had broken up with her 8 months ago, 2 months before we'd started dating. This place is pretty good too, I offered weakly, gesturing at our surroundings. I'd spent hours researching restaurants for our 6-month anniversary dinner, finally settling on this cozy bistro with its exposed brick walls and candlelit ambiance. Oh, absolutely, Sarah agreed quickly, reaching across to squeeze my hand. I didn't mean, I'm sorry, Jake. I don't know why I keep doing that. But she did keep doing it. Over the next few weeks, Marcus's ghost seemed to hover over every conversation, every date, every quiet moment between us. When we went hiking, she mentioned how Marcus had taken her to climb Mount Washington. When I cooked her favorite meal, she commented on how Marcus used to make his own pasta from scratch. When we watched a movie, she'd inevitably mention how Marcus had introduced her to foreign films. I tried to be understanding at first. Breakups were hard, especially when you'd been with someone for 3 years like Sarah had been with Marcus. I told myself it was natural for her to have memories to make comparisons. But as the weeks turned into months, my patience began to wear thin. One evening, we were at my apartment, sprawled on the couch after a long day at work. I'd just finished telling her about a promotion I was being considered for when she sighed. Marcus got promoted 3 times in 2 years at his company, she said, staring at the ceiling. He was just so driven, you know. So ambitious. Something snapped inside me. I sat up abruptly, causing her to look at me in surprise. Sarah, we need to talk about this, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. About what? She blinked innocently, but I caught the flicker of recognition in her eyes. About Marcus. About how you bring him up constantly. About how I'm starting to feel like I'm competing with a ghost. She sat up too, pulling her knees to her chest. I don't bring him up that much. You brought him up 17 times last week, I said. I counted. Her face flushed. You were counting? What else was I supposed to do? Every conversation seems to lead back to him. His perfect job, his perfect taste in restaurants, his perfect everything. Do you have any idea how that makes me feel? Sarah's eyes filled with tears, and for a moment I felt guilty. But I pushed on, knowing this conversation was long overdue. I care about you, Sarah. But I can't keep doing this if you're still in love with him. I'm not, she protested, the tears spilling over now. He left me, remember? He said he needed to find himself and move to Seattle. He abandoned everything we'd built together. Then why do you talk about him like he hung the moon? She was quiet for a long moment, wiping her eyes with the sleeve of her sweater. When she finally spoke, her voice was small. I guess. I guess it's easier to remember the good things than to admit how much he hurt me. If I make him perfect in my mind, then losing him feels like bad luck instead of not being enough. The admission hung between us, raw and honest. I moved closer to her on the couch, my anger dissipating. You were enough, I said softly. His leaving says nothing about your worth. Sometimes I wonder, she whispered. He was everything I thought I wanted. Successful, charming, adventurous. We had all these plans. And then one day he just decided he didn't want any of it anymore. Didn't want me anymore. I pulled her into my arms, feeling her shake with quiet sobs. Is that why you keep comparing us? Are you trying to figure out what went wrong? She nodded against my chest. I think part of me believes that if I can understand what made him leave, I can prevent it from happening again. But all I'm doing is pushing you away, aren't I? "You're not pushing me away," I said, though that wasn't entirely true. "But you're not letting me in either. I feel like I'm constantly being measured against someone who, from the sounds of it, only exists in your memories. The real Marcus, the one who left, he wasn't perfect." Sarah pulled back to look at me, her eyes red-rimmed but clearer than I'd seen them in months. "You're right. I've been so unfair to you. To us." Over the following weeks, things began to change. The mentions of Marcus didn't stop entirely. 3 years of memories couldn't be erased overnight, but they became less frequent, less reverent. More importantly, Sarah began to see them for what they were, a defense mechanism against vulnerability. She started therapy, something she'd been resistant to before. I'd hear her on the phone sometimes working through the abandonment and self-doubt that Marcus's sudden departure had left in its wake. She began to separate the fantasy of who Marcus had been from the reality of who he was, a man who had made a choice that hurt her deeply. Meanwhile, I had my own work to do. The constant comparisons had taken their toll on my self-esteem, and I had to learn to stop measuring myself against the ghost of Marcus. I was Jake. Imperfect certainly, but present and committed in a way Marcus hadn't been. 3 months after our confrontation, we were having dinner at the same Italian restaurant where everything had come to a head. Sarah was laughing at a story about my disastrous attempt to assemble furniture, her eyes bright with genuine amusement rather than wistful memory. "I love how you always try to skip the instructions," she said, shaking her head. "Even when it means having to take everything apart and start over." "Hey, sometimes my way works," I protested, grinning. "When has your way ever worked with furniture? That bookshelf is still standing." "It's leaning, Jake. It's definitely leaning." We dissolved into laughter, and I realized something she hadn't mentioned Marcus once all evening. More than that, she was fully present with me, creating new memories instead of dwelling on old ones. After dinner, we walked through the city hand in hand. The autumn air was crisp, and the streetlights cast a warm glow on the sidewalks. "I've been thinking," Sarah said suddenly, "about us, about everything." My heart skipped a beat, old anxieties rising. "Yeah." She stopped walking and turned to face me. "I owe you an apology, a real one. For months I used Marcus as a shield. I was so scared of being hurt again that I kept you at arm's length. I compared you to him constantly because if I could convince myself you weren't as good, then it wouldn't hurt as much if you left." "Sarah, let me finish," she said, squeezing my hands. "But here's what I've realized: Marcus may have been perfect in some ways, but he wasn't perfect for me. Because the most important quality in a partner, the thing that matters more than ambition or knowing the best restaurants or any of that, is showing up, and he didn't. But you do. Every day, even when I've made it hard, you show up." I pulled her close, feeling the weight of the past few months lifting. "I'm not going anywhere," I whispered into her hair. "I know," she whispered back. And I'm finally ready to believe that. We stood there on the sidewalk holding each other as the city bustled around us. It wasn't a perfect moment. A taxi honked loudly. Someone's dog barked and it started to drizzle. But it was real. It was ours. Over the next year, our relationship deepened in ways it couldn't have before. Without the constant comparisons, I was free to be myself. The guy who couldn't assemble furniture, who preferred local diners to trendy restaurants, whose idea of adventure was trying a new board game rather than climbing mountains. And Sarah discovered that these things, rather than being inferior to her memories, were simply different, sometimes even better. She still occasionally mentioned Marcus, but the tone had changed entirely. Once when we were planning a vacation, she said, "Marcus and I went to Costa Rica once," then paused and added, "But he complained the whole time about the humidity. I bet you'd actually enjoy the rainforest hikes." I would, and I did. Our trip to Costa Rica was filled with laughter, adventure, And yes, some complaining about humidity on my part too. But I was there present creating new memories with her rather than chasing the ghost of old ones. On our 2-year anniversary, I took Sarah back to that Italian restaurant where everything had started to unravel and then come back together. As we sat at the same table, I couldn't help but think about how far we'd come. "Penny, for your thoughts," Sarah asked, raising her wine glass. "Just thinking about our first anniversary dinner here," I admitted. How different things were then. A shadow crossed her face. "I was horrible that night. I'm still sorry about—" "Hey," I interrupted gently. "We've been through this. That's in the past." She smiled, that real, unguarded smile I'd come to cherish. "You're right. To the present, then." "To the present," I agreed, clinking my glass against hers. Later that evening, as we walked through the same streets we'd walked 2 years before, Sarah suddenly laughed. "What?" I asked, amused by her sudden outburst. "I just realized something. I can barely remember what Marcus's voice sounded like. For so long, he was this huge presence in my mind, this perfect standard I measured everything against. But now, he's just someone I used to know." I squeezed her hand. "Is that a good thing or a bad thing?" "It's a free thing," she said after a moment. "I'm free to just be with you without all those comparisons and fears." As we continued walking, I thought about the journey we'd taken. It hadn't been easy. There had been many moments when I'd wondered if we'd make it, if the ghost of her perfect ex would always stand between us. But we'd weathered it together, and in doing so had built something stronger than perfection. We'd built something real. The truth was, I would never be Marcus. I wouldn't discover hidden restaurants or climb mountains or get promoted 3 times in 2 years. But I would show up day after day, imperfect but present. And in the end, that had made all the difference. 6 months later, as I knelt in that same Italian restaurant with a ring in my hand, Sarah's eyes filled with tears. Happy ones this time. "Yes," she said, before I could even finish asking the question. "Yes, absolutely yes." As the restaurant erupted in applause and the waiter brought complimentary champagne, Sarah leaned in close. "You know what?" she whispered. "This is perfect. You're perfect. Perfect for me." And for the first time, I believed her. Not because I'd become someone I wasn't, but because we'd both learned that perfect isn't about meeting some impossible standard. It's about finding someone whose imperfections fit with yours, who shows up even when things get difficult, who chooses to build a future rather than dwelling in the past. Marcus, wherever he was, had been Sarah's past, but I was her present, and if she'd have me, her future too. And that was more than perfect. It was real, it was ours, and it was enough. As we left the restaurant that night, engaged and giddy with happiness, Sarah stopped suddenly on the sidewalk. "I just want you to know," she said, looking up at me with serious eyes. "I haven't thought about him in months. And tonight, asking me to marry you in the place where I used to, where things were so complicated. It's like you've rewritten that whole memory. Now, when I think of this restaurant, I'll think of this moment. Of you. Of us." I kissed her there on the sidewalk, not caring who might be watching. "That's all I ever wanted," I told her. "To make new memories with you." "Well," she said, grinning as she held up her left hand to admire the ring, "I'd say we're off to a pretty good start." And we were. The ghost of the perfect ex had finally been laid to rest, not through forgetting or competing, but through the simple act of moving forward together. In the end, that's what love really was. Not perfection, but presence. Not comparison, but compassion. Not the past, but the promise of all the imperfect, beautiful tomorrows yet to come. Part 2. The Return. 3 years later, our life had settled into a comfortable rhythm. Sarah and I had been married for 2 years, living in a cozy brownstone in Park Slope that we'd bought together, a far cry from my old bachelor apartment. Sarah had started her own marketing consultancy, and I'd finally gotten that promotion I'd been working toward. We had a routine Saturday mornings at the farmer's market, Sunday brunches with friends, Thursday night cooking experiments that sometimes went hilariously wrong. It was during one of those Thursday nights as I was attempting to make gnocchi from scratch and failing spectacularly that Sarah's phone buzzed with a Facebook notification. She glanced at it absently, then froze. "What is it?" I asked, looking up from the sticky mess of potato and flour covering our counter. Her face had gone pale. "Marcus sent me a friend request." The name hung in the air between us like a sudden drop in temperature. We hadn't spoken about Marcus in over a year. He'd become such a non-entity in our lives that I'd almost forgotten he was a real person who existed somewhere in the world. "Oh," I said, trying to sound casual while my hands stilled in the dough. "Are you going to accept it?" Sarah stared at her phone for a long moment. "I don't know. Should I?" "That's up to you," I said, carefully resuming my kneading with perhaps more force than necessary. She set her phone aside and came over to where I was working, wrapping her arms around me from behind. "You're covered in flour," she murmured against my back. Deflecting, I asked, but there was no accusation in it, just gentle teasing. "Maybe a little," she admitted. "It's just weird. After all this time, why now?" We abandoned the gnocchi experiment, it was destined to fail anyway, and ordered Thai food instead. As we ate pad Thai straight from the containers, Sarah's phone sat between us on the coffee table like an unexploded bomb. "I think I'm going to accept it," she said finally. "Not because I want to reconnect, but because, I don't know, maybe because I'm curious to see if it still affects me. And if it does," she looked at me steadily, "then we'll deal with it together, like we always do." She accepted the friend request that night. Within minutes, a message popped up. "He wants to get coffee," Sarah said, her voice carefully neutral. "Says he's back in New York for a job and wanted to apologize for how things ended." I felt the old familiar twist in my stomach, but it was fainter now, more like an echo of past pain than present worry. "What do you want to do?" "I think," she paused, choosing her words carefully. "I think I want to go. Not because I have feelings for him, but because I need to close that chapter properly. We never had closure, you know? He just left." "I'll come with you," I offered immediately. She shook her head. "No, this is something I need to do alone. But thank you for offering, and for understanding." The day of the coffee meeting, I tried to keep busy at work, but my concentration was shot. Every few minutes, I found myself checking my phone, even though Sarah had promised to text me when it was over. My colleague Dave noticed my distraction. "Everything okay, man?" he asked, perching on the edge of my desk. "Sarah's having coffee with her ex," I admitted. "The one she couldn't stop talking about when we first started dating." Dave winced. "That's rough. You worried?" I thought about it. Not about her feelings changing. More just worried for her, I guess. He really did a number on her when he left. My phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. "Heading home now. Can we do dinner at that Italian place tonight? I have things to tell you." Our Italian place. I smiled despite my nerves. That evening, as we sat in the restaurant that had become such a landmark in our relationship, Sarah looked more at peace than I'd seen her in a long time. "So," I prompted, twirling my wine glass. "How was it?" "Anticlimactic," she said with a small laugh. "He's exactly the same. Still charming, still talking about all his adventures and accomplishments. He's been living in Portland, apparently. Started 3 different companies, traveled through Asia, dated a yoga instructor, then a chef, then a startup founder. Sounds like the same Marcus." That's just it. He is the same, completely unchanged. And sitting there listening to him, all I could think was how exhausting it must be to constantly be chasing the next perfect thing. She reached across the table for my hand. He asked if I was happy. I told him about our life, our home, my business, our Thursday night cooking disasters. And you know what he said? "What?" He said it sounded nice. like it was something small and quaint. And that's when I realized he never would have been happy with the life we've built. He would have always been looking for something more exciting, more perfect, more everything. Did he apologize like he said he wanted to? Sarah nodded. He did. Said he was sorry for leaving so abruptly, that he'd been immature, that I deserved better. And then, in the next breath, he asked if I ever wondered what would have happened if we'd stayed together. My jaw tightened. What did you say? I told him no, she said simply. Because I don't wonder. If we'd stayed together, I'd still be chasing his idea of perfect. I'd be in Portland or Asia or wherever, always feeling like I wasn't quite enough, always watching him look for the next adventure. Instead, I'm here with you building something real. She squeezed my hand. He also asked if I was seeing anyone. When I showed him my wedding ring, he looked genuinely shocked. Asked if it was that guy you rebounded with. Ouch! I said, though, the sting was minimal. I'd long since stopped caring what Marcus thought of me. I told him no. Sarah continued, her eyes soft. I told him you were the love of my life, that you were the person who showed me that love isn't about grand gestures or perfect moments. It's about showing up day after day, even when things are messy or difficult or decidedly imperfect. What did he say to that? Nothing much. I think he was expecting me to still be pining for him. The whole conversation he kept trying to remind me of our good times. But they all felt so hollow now, like looking at photos of someone else's vacation. Pretty, but not mine anymore. We finished dinner and walked home through the Brooklyn streets, the spring air warm and full of promise. As we reached our brownstone, Sarah stopped at the front steps. I unfriended him, she said suddenly. Right after coffee. Deleted the messages too. I don't need that door open, not even a crack. You didn't have to do that for me, I said. I didn't, she replied. I did it for me. For us. That chapter is closed, Jake. Really truly closed. But life has a way of testing our resolutions. 2 months later, we were at a mutual friend's wedding in the Hamptons. Sarah looked stunning in a deep blue dress, laughing with college friends she hadn't seen in years. I was at the bar getting us drinks when I felt a tap on my shoulder. I turned to find myself face to face with Marcus. He was exactly as I'd pictured him. Tall, conventionally handsome, with the kind of easy confidence that came from never having been truly rejected by life. His suit probably cost more than our monthly mortgage payment. You must be Jake, he said, extending a hand. I'm Marcus. I shook his hand, matching his firm grip. I know who you are. Right. Of course. He signaled the bartender for a scotch. I didn't know you guys would be here. She looks good. Happy. She is, I said simply. Listen, man, Marcus said, leaning against the bar with studied casualness. I wanted to apologize. Sarah told me what a hard time she had after I left, how she kept comparing you to me. That must have been tough. I studied him, this man who had loomed so large in the early days of my relationship. In person, he seemed smaller somehow. Just a guy in an expensive suit trying too hard to seem comfortable. It was, I admitted, but we worked through it. Still, he persisted, it must bother you knowing you were her second choice, that if I hadn't left, but you did leave, I interrupted calmly. And thank God for that. His eyebrows shot up. Excuse me. You leaving was the best thing that could have happened, for her and for me. Because you're right, if you'd stayed, she might never have given us a chance. She'd still be trying to be the person you wanted her to be instead of discovering who she actually is. Marcus's confident facade cracked slightly. I loved her, you know. I just needed to find myself. No, I said, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. You loved the idea of her. The Instagram-worthy girlfriend who'd follow you on adventures and make you look good. But you didn't love her enough to stick around when things got real. You didn't love her enough to build something lasting. And you do, every day, I said without hesitation. When she's stressed about work, when she's singing off-key in the shower, when she burns dinner, when she cries at dog food commercials. I love all of it, all of her. The imperfect real version, not the polished idea of her. Marcus was quiet for a moment, swirling his scotch. She used to talk about me, didn't she? When you first started dating, I could tell from how she acted at coffee, like she was proving something. Yeah, she did, I admitted. Drove me crazy for a while, but you know what, I should thank you for that too. Thank me. Because of you, we had to learn to communicate. We had to face insecurities head on instead of pretending they didn't exist. We had to build our relationship on honesty and work instead of just chemistry and hope. So, yeah, thanks for being the ghost we had to exorcise. It made us stronger. Before Marcus could respond, I saw Sarah approaching through the crowd. Her face went through several expressions when she saw who I was talking to: surprise, concern, and then something that looked like pride. Marcus, she said evenly, I didn't know you knew Jen and David. David's my cousin, he said, clearly off balance. I was just Jake and I were just talking. Sarah slipped her arm through mine, a united front. How nice. Jake, they're about to cut the cake. We should find our seats. Good to meet you, Marcus. I said, meaning it. Meeting him had been like finally seeing the monster under the bed in full light, smaller and less frightening than imagination had made it. As we walked away, Sarah whispered, Are you okay? What did he say to you? He tried to make me feel like second best, I said. But honestly, I just felt sorry for him. Sorry. He's still the same guy who left you 4 years ago. Still chasing perfect, still running from real. He'll probably spend his whole life that way. Sarah stopped walking and pulled me aside out of the flow of wedding guests. I love you, she said fiercely. Not second best love, not consolation prize love. First choice forever love. You know that, right? I know, I assured her, and I did. The ghost of Marcus had lost whatever power it once held. Now let's go watch them cut that cake. I heard it's red velvet. Your favorite, she smiled. See, perfect. The rest of the wedding passed without incident. Marcus kept his distance, though I caught him watching us once during the dancing. Sarah laughing as I deliberately butchered the electric slide, her head thrown back in pure joy. He looked away quickly, but not before I saw something like regret cross his features. Later that night, as we drove back to the city, Sarah was quiet for a long time. What are you thinking about? I asked finally. Just how different my life would be if he hadn't left, and how grateful I am that he did. Really, really, I would have married him probably. We'd been together so long it seemed like the next step, and I would have spent my whole life feeling not quite good enough, always trying to be the person he wanted me to be. She turned to look at me. You let me be myself, encourage it even. Do you know how rare that is? You do the same for me, I pointed out. That's why it works, she said softly. We make each other more ourselves, not less. A year later, Sarah was pregnant with our first child. We were painting the nursery a soft yellow. We'd decided to be surprised by the sex when she suddenly laughed. What? I asked, a streak of paint across my nose. I just remembered something. When Marcus and I were together, he used to say he wanted to wait until his mid-40s to have kids. Said he had too much to accomplish first. And I agreed with him. Pushed down the part of me that wanted a family sooner because I thought his plan made more sense. She rubbed her growing belly. Can you imagine? I would have waited another decade for something I wanted because I was too afraid to voice it. Well, now you're stuck with me and my very accomplished paint-splattered face, I said, dotting her nose with yellow. Perfect, she laughed, retaliating with her own paintbrush. Our daughter was born on a Thursday, of course, disrupting our cooking plans for the foreseeable future. As I watched Sarah hold tiny Emma for the first time, I thought about how different this moment was from anything Marcus would have given her. It wasn't glamorous or Instagram worthy. Sarah was exhausted. I hadn't slept in 32 hours and the hospital room smelled like disinfectant. But it was real and it was ours. She's perfect, Sarah whispered. And I knew she meant it in the truest sense. Not flawless, but exactly right for us. Years passed. Emma grew into a tornado of a toddler who inherited Sarah's eyes and my stubborn streak. We had a son, Charlie, who arrived dramatically 3 weeks early, cementing our family's flair for imperfect timing. Our Italian restaurant became the kids' favorite special occasion spot, the owner always sneaking them extra breadsticks. It was there on our 10th wedding anniversary that Sarah raised her glass of wine. I had beer, having never quite developed a taste for wine despite years of trying. To imperfection, she toasted. To showing up, I countered. To us. We said together, clinking glasses as Emma tried to steal olives from my plate, and Charlie dozed in his high chair. Looking back, I sometimes wonder what would have happened if Sarah had never dated Marcus. Would we have found each other anyway? Would our relationship have been easier without his ghost to contend with? But then I realize it doesn't matter. Our story is our story, messy, beginning and all. The struggles we faced in those early days taught us how to weather bigger storms, job losses, family illnesses, the chaos of parenthood. We learned to face problems head on, to communicate, even when it was uncomfortable, to choose each other daily rather than assuming love alone was enough. Marcus had been Sarah's idea of perfect once, but perfect, we learned, is just another word for unsustainable. Real love isn't perfect, it's resilient. It's built on a foundation of small moments, burned dinners, and inside jokes, mortgage payments and diaper changes, arguments that end in laughter and silences that feel like home. So here's to the exes who leave, making room for the ones who stay. Here's to second choices that turn out to be first-rate loves. And here's to the beautiful, imperfect truth that sometimes the best thing that can happen is not getting what you thought you wanted. Because if Sarah had gotten her perfect Marcus, she never would have gotten us. And us, messy, loud, paint-splattered Thursday night disaster us, turned out to be exactly perfect enough.